Welcome to the 2023 NBA Deep Dive Series, where we go from every single team, lowest rated to highest rated, 30 to number 1. And today we have the Houston Rockets. And the Rockets are in we'll call it particular situation. They've effectively been tanking for the last 3 seasons, got rid of MVP James Harden when there was no chance of winning after going to those Western Conference Finals against the Golden State Warriors, coming so close to winning a championship, then missing 27 threes in a row. What was that horrible record? Anyway, after dumping James Harden, getting a buttload of picks from the Brooklyn Nets, they've had the number 2 overall pick in Jalen Green. They've had the number 3 overall pick in Jabari Smith. And this year they had the number 4 overall pick in Amen Thompson. So theoretically, after a big free agent signing, this team should be ready to take off. And yet they're coming in at 27th, and we'll talk about that. But last year they were the worst team in the NBA. Beyond horrible. We're going to talk about the Spurs when we come up to them in just a few rankings, but they were 22-60, and about 59 of those games they were horrible in those losses. It was some of the most uncoached, unkempt basketball I've ever seen. These guys are spoiled and bratish. Behavior was awful. Effort was awful. Defense was awful. And they were just a team that was almost an embarrassment to watch on the court. But they are going to be coming in at 27th. They were 29th last year. So theoretically, they're moving up, but they are coming in with a 77.61 rating. And this free agency kind of feels like a team that you rebuild in 2K23, right? Like you go out the first season, you're like, all right, we're going to spend all our money because we have all this cap space. And they blow all the cap space on mediocre players and pray that your superstars that you've drafted hit their potential. They've traditionally been this unleashed, uncoached team of NBA spoiled brats with minimal accountability and punishment because of what Steven Silas brought to the team, or should I say didn't bring to the team. And while Ime Udoka has his off-the-court issues, he did bring a mentality to Boston that people are kind of hoping that he brings to this Rocket squad. But at the same time, Ime Udoka has been a coach for literally 1 season. Now, that team did go to the finals, and they were young, kind of like this Rocket squad. So if you point to history, you say, he's 1 for 1. Can he be 2 for 2? We're going to have to see. But I need to see from Houston their top picks ball out. Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Alperen Şengün, Cam Whitmore. They need to prove that they're worth something on the court, because realistically, despite picking 2, 3, and 4, the only player who's shown real game, real potential to be a star is Alperen Şengün with limited upside. So all things being equal, I'm probably going to come off as a hater on this team, which is wild because they got a lot of picks from players that I really was favoring and rooting for throughout the draft process. But let's go ahead and talk about the major offseason moves for this Houston Rockets squad. They are going to be losing Ty Washington. He never really got a run on this team because he's not a natural point guard either. He was picked something like 20th, but he was a nice slasher, scorer, combo guard, a bit undersized, but I liked his game out of Kentucky. We'll see if he gets a new run out there. And I believe OKC, they did finally get rid of KJ Martin, because for the longest time it was like, do you want Kenny Martin Jr. or do you want Jae'Sean Tate? Which one of your undersized power forwards do you think you're going to keep for the long haul? And for whatever reason, this Rocket squad traditionally liked Jae'Sean Tate more, even though KJ has more upside, more athleticism, more scoring. Jae'Sean Tate always seemed to eke him out in the minutes and probably the effort department. Josh Christopher's gone. He was a really inefficient shooter for this team as well, kind of similar to Ty Washington. Has a little bit more size, a little bit more FU mentality with the ball. He'll take any shot. He reminded me a lot of a young J.R. Smith. He was athletic, but he just could not shoot, and he hasn't figured out how to shoot the ball yet. Usman Garuba, speaking of not shooting, was a great defender and horrible offensively, and that kind of was a black hole for his game that he started to work on. That 3 was starting to come along, but they effectively dumped him, and they got rid of Dyson Nix. Oh my God, if you've been following this Houston Rocket squad, he was the most hated man on this team last season. He is just so bad at the game of basketball. It is hilarious. He had weight issues. He had effort issues. He had attention issues. He was just a bad player. And I think every Houston Rockets fan is so happy that both Steven Silas is gone and Dyson Nix, because Steven Silas loved playing him about 30 minutes a night, is gone as well. But speaking on that man, Steven Silas, and I don't want to ridicule him, it was the first time that he was a head coach. He was coming in expecting to be coaching up James Harden, and their offense with James Harden was give James Harden the ball, let James Harden do what James Harden does. And after James Harden left, he was like, oh, now I have to develop these young guys, which I have no concept and no understanding of doing. So he came in to be an offensive genius, and turned out they needed him to be a school teacher. And he just wasn't really prepared for the job. And we will see how this upcoming season comes off. But after these additions, you get Fred VanVleet on a wild contract. We'll talk about that in a bit. Dylan Brooks coming over on another wild contract. And it's a little bit weird that this is the direction that the Rockets are going. They're saying this is the roster we want. We're going all in. But the guys that we're going to splurge on free agency is Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, I just don't know if I agree with the vision. They did get Amen Thompson with the number 4 overall pick, and personally, he was one of my favorite players in this draft class. He is flash, he is size, he is speed, he is strength, he is a versatile guy. The only thing he can't do is shoot. Cam Whitmore fell to 20. We all know that story. How? Why? I do not know. And then some more free agent pickups. Jacques Landale is getting $8 million for 4 years. Not sure how I feel about that. He's really going to be a backup center, and it feels like $8 million is a little bit much, especially when you have a bona fide star at least blooming in Alperen Şengün already. So at best, Jacques Landale is going to be your backup. I feel like you don't need to spend $8 million on that. And then Jeff Green coming over. Maybe he's going to bring some accountability alongside Ime Udoka. But let's move on and talk about this roster, and we're talking about Fred VanVleet. Now, for the Toronto Raptors, Fred VanVleet was a fan favorite. He was part of the team that won a championship out there in Toronto with Kyle Lowry and with Kawhi Leonard. He's a shot maker. He's a big-time, confident guy. He's actually a pesky defender, too. You won't notice, but his steals are up. He's always, I think, top 5 in deflections and steals, despite being the fact that he's 5'10". He's stout. He's strong. He's going to fight you even though he lacks the size. He's not a negative defender, or at least not too bad compared to a guy that's undersized like an Isaiah Thomas when he was in the league at 5'8". Fred VanVleet can hold his own, which is why he scratched out such a strong and long tenure in the NBA. Now, last year was a really down year, and I think a lot of that had to do with his injuries. He was struggling with a back, and he just never really found his rhythm. He was not unplayable. You look at his VORP, it's 2.9. He was pretty good last year, but at the same time, he was also on a bad team in the Toronto Raptors who was still struggling to figure out their identity, and they're still struggling with that to this day. And he wasn't a great leader for these young guys. There was a lot of locker room issues going on, and Fred VanVleet was at the center of that because he was their best player. So for Fred, if he can both shoot efficiently, because that 34% was a career low, I believe, from 3, and stay aggressive consistently, any team is going to want his offensive versatility. That 34% from 3 last year was well below his, I believe, 37% from 3 career average. If he reverts to the norm, he's going to be great. But he had just so many 5 of 23 nights last year and couldn't defend all that well because of his size and just didn't move all that well. He didn't look like the Fred VanVleet that we know and love in Toronto, but he was a career high in assists. And then if you go and extrapolate the numbers a little bit more, Toronto, similar to Houston, was a really bad shooting team. So those assist numbers might be a little lower than you'd expect. He might have been closer to 8 or 9 assists a game if the Toronto Raptors could hit any of their 3-pointers. So what, a 19-4-9 season is pretty damn good for a guy who's going to be getting paid. Now, the contract is a big concern, and we'll talk about that when we get to the salary screen. But oh my God, he's getting like $44 million from the Houston Rockets right now. He's effectively the guy that's going to turn this team from pretenders to contenders. And I just don't know if it was the right guy to go all in on, especially with the issues that he had with the young Toronto Raptors locker room last season. I'm a little concerned about the signing. I love Fred VanVleet, the man, the player, what he's gotten through. He's an undrafted player who is, I think he set the record for highest paid undrafted player ever in the NBA. Like, the dude is a bona fide bucket. He's got a great story. I just don't know how he fits in this Rocket squad that needs veteran leadership. They need almost I was going to say Draymond Green, but Draymond just flies around punching people. They need somebody who's going to come in and set a mentality for this team. And Fred VanVleet's kind of a quiet competitor. He's not a fiery leader. He's not a Tom Brady. He's more of a get your lunch pail and go to work kind of guy. Enough about him, though. Fred VanVleet is going to be probably the starting point guard, because when you're getting paid $44 million, unless your name is Russell Westbrook, you're probably not going to come off the bench. But let's talk about Jalen Green. And oh boy, Jalen Green. Now, statistically, he had a great season. 22 points, 3.7 rebounds, 3.7 assists. That is pretty good. And then you look further in the numbers, 33% from 3. Bad. VORP is 0, meaning the number 2 overall pick 2 seasons ago is equivalent to a replacement player. And I thought he was going to ball out last year. I had him as my most improved player candidate because he kind of struggled in his rookie year and then put some things together as the season ended. And this Houston terrorist organization did not help in any way. I wanted to see him cook in a 5-out offense, learn some offense, play great off of and with Alperen Şengün, and instead, it just kind of ended in a disappointing season yet again for Jalen Green. His shooting didn't come along whatsoever, and I don't know if it's his form or just not practicing enough, and getting in the gym and getting those reps up, but he cannot shoot efficiently. His shot selection is horrible, which probably contributes to him shooting 33% from the 3-point line, but he has crazy athleticism. He's probably a top 5 athlete in today's NBA. The dude can fly. The dude is fearless. Everybody has seen how many times he tries to dunk on somebody with no fucks whatsoever. He needs to model his game though after De'Aaron Fox, like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, these young guys who haven't quite learned to shoot, but they figure out ways to be efficient. He needs to develop his bag. So many drives. He just runs as fast and as hard as he can into the defender's chest and then throws up an ugly shot. He needs polish. He needs practice. He needs wiggle. But he needs to keep up that aggressiveness that we've seen that let him be a number 2 overall pick. And more importantly, on the defensive end, he needs to get locked in. He was a horrible defender last year, and 99% of that was effort because he can move, he can slide side to side. He's an incredible athlete, like we've said, but he just doesn't try. And Steven Silas held zero accountability for this whole team on the defensive end. And then offensively, this team was a disaster. So many possessions. When I was going through the power rankings, I would say that I've never seen a team go from 24 seconds on the shot clock, let's run some offense, to, oh crap, there's nothing to do. We need to panic and get an ISO possession up. And that was at about 18 seconds left on the shot clock every single possession. So this team was constantly playing behind the 8 ball, trying to make something out of nothing. And Jalen Green often had the ball in his hands, or Kevin Porter Jr., and it was just not pretty. Jalen Green plays like a bust a lot. He was out of control. He doesn't have a good feel for the game right now. I just need him to get into the lab this offseason and really work on his game. Get somebody that's going to teach him how to play basketball within the team, within the offense, get some offense. And just, there's so many things that have been going wrong with this Jalen Green number 2 overall pick in the Houston Rockets organization. But Jalen Green is a bona fide superstar in the making. He has all the potential in the world to be one of the best players we've seen in recent history. He's a crazy athlete. He has no fear, no shame. He can shoot from anywhere on the court. He just needs to build that consistency. So I said last year he's going to be a most improved player candidate. Hopefully this year he has a chance to be a most improved candidate. Make a breakout year, score 25 a night, but be efficient on that. Run within the offense, and he's going to have to fight for buckets now with Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks coming over. Alperen Şengün is already going to get his, so it's going to be tough. How is Jalen Green going to assert himself and dominate on the offensive end? And I think that all starts with the defensive end. He needs to buy into what Ime Udoka is preaching, and we'll talk about Ime in a little bit. But that is the Jalen Green spiel, where we go into the Dillon Brooks spiel. And oh boy for him, because he got effectively kicked out of Memphis after having some good seasons and some bad seasons. Now in Memphis, he reached that point where the knuckleheads get in their career, where production versus tolerance boils over, and his production was not meeting the tolerance. You can see he was a negative player last year. You can see he shot 32% last year from 3, which isn't going to cut it. And look, he's a great defender. He's at the very least an All-NBA second team defender. I feel like he's a first team defender a lot of seasons, the way he just attacks the other superstars. And I know he doesn't get in people's head and he doesn't rattle them all that well, but he annoys you. He's pesky. He knows how to play defense and angles and positions. He's got a great body. He's like 6'7", 230, so he can basically guard anybody as well as you can in today's NBA, which is really to slow the other player down, not to stop the other player. That's how you defend the great ones. And Dillon Brooks does that. Now he's going to be doing that for 4 years on this Rocket squad. I hope so. I hope he brings a little bit of a dickhead mentality to this roster, because they're severely lacking that on the defensive end. And you can see the defense start to pick up with Fred VanVleet, a pretty pesky POA defender when he's healthy for the guard position, then Dillon Brooks, who can guard the other team's best wing player, and then just kind of let the other guys run their offense. Now last year, Dillon Brooks really struggled mentally, and this was a contract year. This was when he was supposed to step up and be his best, and he wasn't. His shot fell off completely. 32% is horrible. He lost a lot of his confidence offensively, and the scouting report kind of figured him out. So while he can still be a pest defensively, I'm really hoping he comes to Houston and has that swagger that he had earlier. He's a great perimeter defender, possibly one of the top 5 in the league along the Mikal Bridges, and that really deserves some credit when he's on his game. I still remember how pesky he was against Steph Curry in that play-in tournament game where the Grizzlies won largely in effort because of him. Now, offensively, he fell off, and I think he was more of a one-year wonder on the offensive end when he was scoring almost 20 points a night efficiently. I think he's more of a defender who's going to get up in you, and he might be coming off the bench if some of these younger guys really develop their offensive game. But Dillon Brooks is more than capable of offering you something important to a team that's looking to build both a defensive identity and bring along the young guys. And I think he's going to be a starter to start the season, and he's going to be a really tough and pesky defender, and hopefully he can be kind of a leader for this team, because I know he's a dickhead, and I know that he's his issues on the court, and he's built this most hated man in the NBA sort of identity. And I kind of hope that he brings that to Houston, because they've been playing soft for the better part of 3 years. So that is the Dillon Brooks spiel. And now we'll go to the Jabari Smith spiel because every single one of these players, there's a lot to talk about. Starting with Jabari Smith, the former number 3 overall pick, projected number 1 overall pick, and last year was, let's face it, last year was bad. Now, as funny as it is to say Jabari Smith is a bust, I'm really disappointed in the Houston Rockets development team. The coaching team as well kind of broke Jabari, and to me, Jabari Smith Jr. is a generational talent. A silky smooth 6'10", 6'11", small forward, power forward, center with feathery touch from 30 feet. He's athletic, he can be a lockdown defender, probably 2 through 5, and the Rockets broke his confidence. There were so many quotes that came out throughout the season that were saying they don't even run plays for him. They just say, post up, spot up in the corner, spot up for 3, and catch and shoot. And that was your offense when he was supposed to be a bona fide bucket coming out of Auburn. He does come with his fair share of weaknesses. His handle was really bad, and that needs to get fixed through practice and with the development team. But like I was saying with, I think, Johnny Davis for the Washington Wizards, run some plays for Jabari. Get it so that he doesn't have to put the ball on the court. A lot of his offensive possessions is have him post up on a guy who's a little shorter than him and hope he creates something out of the post in an inefficient manner because the post game and the mid-range game is near dead in today's NBA. Get something good for Jabari. Get him an open elbow jumper. Get him an open three-pointer. Run off some screens. Do something for Jabari other than just say, go stand over there and catch and shoot from 3. Like, what the Jabari Smith, number 3 overall pick, deserves more respect than like Jay Crowder. And I think part of it is because Jabari is nice to a fault. And then the Rockets robbed him of all of his swagger last season. And as much as I appreciate him saying that he wants to be a great defender, he's not an elite defender. And that's okay because he wasn't drafted to be Nick Claxton. He was drafted to be Kevin Durant mini. He was drafted to be a guy who has an unblockable shot. And he even showed me a little bit of that as the season went on. He kind of started to figure it out, similar to how Jalen Green did in his rookie season, where he was like, all right, this is how I can play my role. This is how I can get my buckets. And he looked less and less like a bust last year as the season went on, but 30% from 3 is horrible. And he was drafted as a guy who shot, I think, 38% from 3 at 6'11". So that needs to get back to what his career average is from at least Auburn. Now, for me personally, as the Jabari Smith development train rolls on, I hope that he works on getting one elite skill because in the NBA, we're a league of specialists and his was supposed to be scoring. So for now, that's not coming along. But even if it's getting into the post, putting his butt into the defender, get in position, and then rising up over him with a jump shot, be elite at that. At least start off with one elite skill and then continue working on yourself because last year was awful. He was an undraftable player level of bad to start his rookie year. And then eventually he worked his way up closer to resembling the guy at Auburn. And then in the summer league, he balled out like we thought he would in his rookie season. So what I'm seeing in the Jabari Smith development train is that he's recovered his confidence and recovered his game back to how he was as a draftable prospect, possibly going number 1 overall in the Paulo Banchero, Chet Holmgren sweepstakes. That essentially means, though, that last year, we basically lost him to injury. It was just mental instead of physical. And that's why I'm so resentful of this Houston Rockets team, specifically Steven Silas, because they effectively ruined Jabari Smith's rookie year. He hasn't developed his game. He wasn't efficient. He didn't learn or get a feel for NBA pace of play at all. It was just a really frustrating year as a guy who kind of was on the Jabari Smith train. I wanted him to go number 1 overall. I thought he has the highest upside out of every player in that class with his shooting, with his touch. And right now he's on the outside looking in as a role player for this Rocket squad. But we'll be going on to somebody who is not a role player in Alperen Şengün, who is probably their best player right now, their most polished player right now. And I understand that I was too low on Alperen Şengün when the draft process was underway. Last year was kind of a breakout year for him, not statistically, but literally, in that he was the only bright spot of this offense, a focal point. Every team was like, we don't have to game plan for anybody on the Houston Rocket squad except for Alperen Şengün, who averaged 15, 9, and 4 last year, which is near incredible for his center, especially a guy who's only like 6'8". Now he's getting props from players and media alike, and he deserves a lot of respect, but he's going to have to mirror his game after Nikola Jokic. And that's kind of tough because, first of all, Nikola Jokic has about 2 inches of size on Alperen Şengün. You can see that on the defensive end when he averages, I think it's like 0.9 blocks last year. Not acceptable for your center to offer you almost no rim protection whatsoever. Now that's where a guy like Jabari Smith can come in along the weak side, offer your team some rim protection when Alperen Şengün can't jump, because Alperen Şengün is not an athlete whatsoever. He's in the Tom Brady level of athleticism when it comes to what he offers to your team. But what Alpi does offer the team is those high IQ plays. He's an incredible passer, not just for his size, but he's probably top 10, top 15 already as a passer in today's game. He sees the court really well. He reads passing lanes great, and he can just get your guys the ball in the spot where they're going to score. But last year, the team could not shoot to save your life. So similar to Fred VanVleet having low assist numbers compared to what they probably should be, Alperen Şengün has low assist numbers. He'd probably be closer to 5 or 6 as a center assists per game if the Rockets could shoot at all. But you might notice a theme here. Nobody on the Rockets can shoot. Fred VanVleet, 34% last year. Jalen Green, 33.8% last year. Dillon Brooks, 32% last year. Jabari Smith, 30% last year. And then Alperen Şengün also cannot shoot, 33.3% last year. And I don't expect that to get any better. That's going to be a huge weakness for his game. And he can't shoot the free throw well. He can't shoot from 3 well. He is an okay mid-range game, but for the most part, Alperen Şengün gets a lot of his points as putbacks, as effort, as getting into the post and spinning and pump faking and whirling and wigging around the guys until he can finally get an open layup. And that's fine. That works. It's tough to defend, but he's not going to be able to be a great modern big as far as whatever that means to you in today's NBA. Now, I'd like to see the new incoming head coach, Ime Udoka, run some of that Domantas Sabonis offense for Alperen Şengün, have him handle the ball at the elbow. Defenses will try to cover him. He'll have a little space to either do some dribble handoffs and roll hard to the paint, get those offensive rebounds that he's good at, run some pin down screens off ball, let him pass to the open man. I'd like to see him run the offense out of the elbow, kind of be the point center for this team that Domantas Sabonis was for the Sacramento Kings. I think there's a lot of similarities in their play styles. They can't shoot, but they're great passers. They have good vision. They're not great defenders, but they can compensate. There's a lot for Alperen Şengün to improve upon this year. But the issues with him is that he's a bad shooter, and he probably always will be. He's not an athlete, and he's not a great defender. Now, I have changed my tune. I did not realize that Nikola Jokic was a good defender until we saw him in the finals just trying. Really, it was all it needed because he was kicking his hands out, and he was flying around with his limbs, making sure that no passes were easy. He was not a liability when it came to being on the perimeter. He tried his butt off. He actually gave effort on the defensive end. And for a guy who isn't an athlete, a guy who I thought is a complete liability once he gets pulled out to the perimeter, he figured out how to use angles, how to use his brains, and how to make sure that he's not getting beat repeatedly, as well as the defensive scheme that Mike Malone has in place to make sure Nikola Jokic isn't exposed. And I think Ime Udoka needs to look at that defense, both teach Alperen Şengün how to be a pest on the defensive end, because I can't tell you how many times Joker kicked the ball when there was a pass that would have led to a layup, as well as rotate down the weak side defender, probably in this case Jabari Smith or Dillon Brooks most of the time, going to come down and make sure that there's rim protection behind Alperen Şengün when he needs to get pulled out to the perimeter on a switch. So I like Alperen Şengün to be a figurehead and a major point of operations for this Houston Rockets offense. I don't want him to be the superstar because I still am a little hesitant on what his full potential is going to be. And like I said, I might be a hater of Alperen Şengün. I'm not sure yet, but he was incredible last year. Moving on to the bench, where we're going to talk about more of these guys like Kevin Porter Jr., who is a tough case and a nutcase and turned the ball over 3.2 times per game last year, which is unacceptable for your quote-unquote point guard. He's a decent point guard, might be around 20 to 30th in the NBA last year, but definitely something that you can improve upon. But at the same time, he was a great scoring guard for them. And if you say you're not a point guard, but you're a combo guard coming off the bench to give us a spark, that is the perfect Kevin Porter Jr. role. The problem is he has to buy in on that. And a lot of his game, a lot of his issues are off the court. It's mental, especially defensively, but also offensively, and not getting mad and throwing fucking food and lunches at your head coaches. Now, last year, let's just say it, he was their best player until Alperen Şengün took off. He was quick. He's explosive. He can shoot from anywhere. He has that James Harden lefty step back three. He can finish well. He has incredible touch. He is an offensive weapon. And it's no surprise last year when he went down with injury, so did their season, so did their win total. Now, the big question for Kevin Porter Jr. is, and always will he be able to be locked in when he's playing defensively or coming off the bench for this Houston Rockets squad? Because I think he could be probably Tyus Jones 2.0, better, one of the best bench scorers coming off and giving your team a lightning bolt of athleticism and freakish skill. He averaged 19 points a game last year. That's nothing to sneeze about. I know that this team was bad, but Kevin Porter Jr. is a dynamic offensive scorer. He needs to play better defense, period. He needs to stop turning the ball over so much, period. And he needs to be locked in for a full season, 82 games, period. But if he can run this second unit like he was running it last year with the starters, like he was being a closer and winning games for them single-handedly, this could be a mean and deep Houston Rockets squad. And moving on to the number 4 overall pick, Amen Thompson. And he was one of my favorite players in the draft, if not my favorite player in the draft, because everybody knows how good Victor Wembanyama was. Everybody loved Brandon Miller's shooting and Scoot Henderson's athleticism. But for me, personally, Amen Thompson was the number 3 overall player in the draft behind Scoot and Vic. His overtime elite tape was elite. He can pass. He flies around on defense. And unlike his brother, at least in the overtime elite, he tried. He's basically a tier 1 up on his brother in every single category, defensively, offensively, playmaking. Meanwhile, he was also a natural point guard for the team. Now, he can't shoot, and you can see from 23% from 3, 56% from the field, whoever taught these Thompson twins how to shoot the ball should be fired. It is ugly. It is an awful shot. Neither of them can shoot from anywhere beyond 2.5 feet. But Amen Thompson is just so ridiculously calm at all times. He's incredible in the transition. He has great size if he's going to be the point guard of the future, overtake maybe a Fred VanVleet later on in the season. His decision making is up there with some of the best that I've seen. He's quick. He's an incredible finisher with both hands. He finished so many lefty layups in that one summer league game that we saw. He's got polish to all of his game minus the jump shot. His transition decision making is incredible. He's athletic. He bullies through you. He's flashy. He's decisive. He plays with a pit bull mentality. He will elbow check guys on rebounds, drive through you. Like, he had LeBron-esque strength and intensity for a dude who's like 19. He has LeBron James potential to his game, but there's going to be a few things that hold him back. First of all, that jump shot just has to come up. If you're shooting 23% from 3, you're not going to be in the NBA for long. I don't care how highly you were drafted. That is unacceptable. And secondly, I was really unimpressed with his defense in the summer league. Now, I know A, the summer league doesn't matter, and B, he's the number 4 overall pick. How hard do you really have to try on the defensive end? But it was just a little bit of a point of concern for me, specifically watching his defense. He died on screens a lot. He got crossed up way too easily in that 1v1 versus Scoot Henderson. I was actually kind of shocked how bad he was in the 1v1 matchup they had, but it is the summer league, and in overtime elite, he was reading plays so easily for the OTE. He was just jumping passing lanes. He was bullying everybody. He knew he was the best player in the court. He swatted at the ball as people were driving, led to so many deflections and steals. He was an elite defender, which is why I thought he was the number 3 overall player in the draft class, along with his incredible playmaking and athleticism. I have nothing but positive things to say about Amen Thompson, the number 4 overall pick. I think he's going to be the point guard of the future, and if they didn't sign Fred VanVleet, I would have hoped that he would have been the starting point guard day 1. But we'll have to see how this Houston Rockets squad mixes and matches a lot of these players. Moving on to Jae'Sean Tate, who I guess on the one hand, I'm glad that they cleared up who's going to start and who's going to stick around on the team as the undersized power forward, Jae'Sean Tate or Kenyon Martin Jr. But man, he's one of those guys I wish was 5 inches taller, because there's no shortage of aggression to his game. There's no lack of effort offensively or defensively, but he's just too short to make a true difference in the game. He can't shoot the ball at all, 28% from 3. You're noticing a theme here. Other than Kevin Porter Jr., none of these guys can shoot. Is unacceptable, but he's one of the classic blue-collar guys. He's going to go out there, give you everything he's got. Doesn't matter how short or how tall he is. Doesn't matter how bad of a shooter he is. He's going to try his ass off and give you 9 points, 4 rebounds, 2.7 assists. He has a little ball handling to him that you kind of wouldn't expect from a guy who was drafted. I think he's either a second-round draft pick or undrafted, but he's also a bit older. He doesn't fit the timeline of this team like Kenyon Martin Jr. did, but every single season, the coaching staff prioritized and played Jae'Sean Tate more than Kenyon Martin Jr., and I can only attribute that to effort on both sides of the court. So he's not got a high overall. He's not going to be a great player for your team. He's undersized, and that's always going to be a weakness on the defensive end, but he's going to go out there and give you effort. So at the very worst, he deserves to be like the 9th or 10th man on this Houston Rockets squad. Moving over to Tari Eason, who had himself a rookie year. Oh my gosh. I know the stats aren't incredible, but he was a great defender. I don't know if he made the all defensive second team, but he was certainly qualifying it. He does the dirty work. He guards your best wing player. He's tough. He's strong. He's long. There's no shortage of effort. He's an offensive rebounding machine. He has one speed, and that is attack at all times. Defensively, he will attack the guy he's guarding. He will attack a Kevin Durant. He was Dylan Brooks-esque on the defensive end, and I fully expect Tari Eason to take over the starting role from Dylan Brooks and maybe even Jabari Smith because he has that FU mentality. Offensively, he has only one speed, and that is to shoot the ball or drive really fucking hard when he catches it and force the refs to make a decision, either grants him some free throws or put up a dunk, yam it on somebody. Tari Eason was impressive. Now, his game was very simplified, so you'd like to see him open up and be a little more versatile offensively, learn some dribble moves, get that three-point shot up from 34%. But he was a great player for them last year. And honestly, probably the second best player, I would say, alongside Kevin Porter Jr. and Alperen Şengün. So probably third best player, sorry. But Tari Eason was more impressive than Jabari Smith, outworked, outplayed, outshot, out-efforted Jabari Smith, number 3 overall pick. And he was one of the best defenders in the NBA. That certainly means that he's going to see starting minutes here. And if not here, then certainly somewhere, because Tari Eason is a stud, a diamond in the rough, and I'm looking forward to seeing his game develop because that was his rookie year last year. Imagine a better version of Tari Eason a year under his belt with head coach Ime Udoka leading the way. And finally, Jacques Landale, who we'll talk about his contract in a bit, but he is coming over and he was surprisingly good. He was one of the more underappreciated players from last year on the Sun squad because they had Kevin Durant, because they had DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul, all of his issues, and Devin Booker being a bucket, and Monty Williams. Jacques Landale wasn't really talked about, but he was great for them, all things being equal. He filled the Dario Saric role with more center than shooter. He's undersized, but he tries really hard. And I think that came from his time with the Spurs, but he was generally in the right place most of the time on the court, either under the hoop to catch a clever pass, rotating down, stretching the floor, grabbing the rebound. He just puts himself in the right place at the right time to contribute positively to plays. And there were a lot of games where Jacques Landale outplayed number 1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton, which I know DeAndre Ayton has his own issues, but man, Jacques Landale, possible starting center. Now they do have Alperen Şengün, which makes the contract seem a little head scratching. And like I said, we'll talk about that when we get to the salary screen, but Jacques Landale, positive player, another guy who needs to get that 3-pointer up, but he was really good last year for the Suns. And finally, on to the rest of this team. Now, there's only 3 guys on the roster. They have 2 open roster spots, but Aaron Holiday coming over from the Atlanta Hawks, he was pretty good last year as well. He's one of the few guys who can actually shoot the 3. You see the 41% last year, but he only played 13 minutes a night, so we will have to see how much does he truly offer to a team? But he's a decent combo guard. He'll be able to stretch the floor, fill in case any of the other guys are either out with injury or just having a really bad night. They need some floor spacing. At this point in his career, he's a wily veteran. I think he's like 30-something years old. He's just been around the league long enough to know how to play the game of basketball. Cam Whitmore fell to 20, and I don't know why. And I don't think anybody knows why, because there were times when he's a top 10 prospect. For me, he was a top 5 prospect. I probably would have taken him behind Vic Scoot, Brandon Miller, and Amen, but number 5 seems more than sensible because of how good he was at Villanova, how great of an athlete he is. I don't know how he fell to 20. He has NBA polish. He's a tick undersized. They list him at 6'7". He looks more 6'4", 6'5", but he's strong. He's graceful. He can fly. He's agile. He's a good defender. He's got a grown man's body already, and I think he's like 19 years old. The dude is jacked. He's strong. Now, the shot needs to come along. 34% from 3 in college isn't great, and that needs to get better, but he doesn't have great shot selection, and he has really bad decision making. Oh my gosh, watching him in transition, he only knows that he needs to go and attack the rim. So on the one hand, you go, all right, this guy's gonna try to fly and dunk on you and dunk over you, and you're like, all right, I love that mentality. But at the same time, he'll miss entry passes, he'll miss wide open passing lanes, he'll miss open teammates in the corner. So his passing and playmaking is almost non-existent from what I saw, meaning that he's likely going to be a bench guy instead of a starter, but that's always a chance he can develop his game. That's why drafting these players when they're in their teens is so tough, because you don't know how good they're going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. NBA players don't reach their prime until they're about 28 years old, and Cam Whitmore is what, 19? He's already a shot maker. I think he won the Summer League MVP because he was just a bucket leader for this Rocket squad. Clearly the best player in the court when they weren't playing all the other starters. He is a damn good player and deserves respect and probably should not have fallen to 20th. Now, I don't know how he's going to crack the rotation. Who is he going to beat out, though? Is he going to outplay Jalen Green? Is he going to outplay Kevin Porter Jr. or Fred VanVleet, Tari Eason? He's going to struggle to find minutes because there's a lot of decently good players on this Rockets squad. I don't know how much he elevates the team when he's playing because he is a really bad passer and has really bad vision, as evidenced by those 0.7 assists last year at Villanova. But he is dynamic and he is electric, and he is certainly a talent that the Rockets are blessed to have picked up at pick 20. And lastly is Jeff Green, Dunkle Green, who came over kind of getting overpaid, but he did win a championship. And whenever you win a championship, your guys get paid. And in this case, Jeff Green is getting the mid-level exception to come over here and be a quote-unquote leader for this team. Now, he was a lot of times unplayable. That 28% I think might be a career low from 3 last year. His shot has really fallen off. I don't know if he's going to honestly crack the rotation or be more like a Udonis Haslem for this Houston Rockets squad, but he's an old, wily veteran, 36, I think, going on 37 years old, knows how to play the game of basketball, plays good enough defense, can be that stretch 4, undersized 5 for teams that are going really small. There's not too much to say. He was pretty bad last year. His athleticism is waning given his age, but he does dunk the ball still on everybody, and he does have a championship over his belt. Hopefully he can provide some veteran leadership to this team, which is clearly lacking, but they're starting to pick up a few wily veterans, especially in this free agency. And then there's the rest of the guys. There's a bunch of 10-day contracts and 2-ways guys. There's Darius Days, a big, strong, undersized scorer. He can shoot the ball well. He is a big, wide body, but he's about 6'5" and has stiff hips. I don't know if he can bring you enough defensively to compensate the minor offense that he brings you. Trevor Hudgens is actually a guy that I kind of like. He's an undersized point guard, but I feel like if this team is needing a point guard, if like say Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson, and Kevin Porter Jr. all go down with injury or whatever happens to where they need a point guard 3 or a point guard 4, Trevor Hudgens can come in and hold down the fort. He's just a reliable, unimpressive point guard who does the little things. He's a non-athlete, but a decent passer. And a point guard needy team like, I don't know, say the Memphis Grizzlies, who aren't going to have John Morant for a quarter of a season, need a point guard to come in and play backup to the backup. Trevor Hudgens can be that dude. Jermaine Samuels, not a great athlete, undersized 4/5 tweener, not great. He's really strong though. Everybody who tried to back him down in the summer league failed tremendously, but he has no shot, no touch. He just throws the ball at the hoop. Nate Hinton, honestly, I kind of liked his game in the summer league. He's a decent athlete, has a good NBA build. If he could ever learn how to shoot the 3, I think he's shooting 20% for his career. If he could ever bump that up to closer to career average, he certainly has a shot to play in the NBA, and a team like the Warriors or somebody who has a very small farm system could certainly pick him up and use him on their team. Jonathan Williams, I don't know how to say his name. He was on the Blazers last year. Not all that impressive. Didn't do much last year to really stand out other than have his name. Joshua Obiesie, I don't know who he is. He's a European big. Haven't seen any of his tape, but I don't expect too much from him. And then Matthew Mayer, he was on that Baylor squad that won a championship, I want to say 2 years ago. I don't know how to describe him other than a big doofy shooter, kind of that David Bertans mold, where he's a bucket from 3. He can shoot probably 40% from the 3-point line, but his defense isn't great. His basketball IQ is non-existent. He's just a big old goofy guy who has great touch. And look, maybe that'll offer something to some team. David Bertans got paid like $18 million a year just because he could shoot the 3. But that is going to be it for their roster. Moving on to the coach and culture ranking, where they're going to come in at the bottom, tier 5. And I know that Ime Udoka led the Boston Celtics to a finals in his first season, and I have to respect that and understand that he is a tough guy. The players love him. I don't think there's a single bad report about Ime Udoka from any of his former players. But he did have the scandal having sex with one of the workers or whatever the hell happened. I don't care anymore. And there's a lot of reliance on what Ime Udoka is going to bring to this team in terms of accountability and discipline that they were lacking under head coach Steven Silas. So you almost are hoping and relying on magic for him to come in and do the exact same thing he did to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, bring some confidence and bring some defense to the team. And remember, in that first year he was coaching, they were barely a 500 team to start the first half of the season. Now they took off in the second half, which, as you all know, led to the finals. But he's going to need some time to instill his culture to this team, to instill that toughness. And I keep saying the same word, but accountability for this team, because they're playing with a bunch of kids who mess around and don't try really hard. They don't give a crap about winning basketball games. They just make sure that they get their shots up. That was a huge thing for this team, was make sure that the star guys get their shot attempts, but not be efficient. There was no offense. There was no defense. This team was almost a joke 90% of the time they played basketball, and I feel bad for the Houston Rockets fans. So I'm hoping and I'm rooting for this Rockets team to improve. But They are going to be coming in at the bottom with that tier 5 ranking because I haven't seen anything to prove me otherwise. GM Raphael Stone has a vision. This team has been doing the process. They have 3 top 4 picks now in their lineup. What are they going to do with a bona fide head coach now that Steven Silas is finally gone? We will have to see, but I'm always a prove it guy. I'm never going to give you credit for work you have not done yet. And right now, this Houston Rockets squad has not proven to me anything yet. Moving on to the salary cap, where they are going to be coming in an interesting spot. So at the end of the day, you have to give out money in the NBA. I think you need at least 2/3 of your cap to be spent, but I don't know if they spend it right. You start at the top. Fred VanVleet is getting $40 million this year, $42 million next year, and a team option $44 million the following year. And I understand going out and spending the money. I don't know what kind of free agents were really, truly available to this Houston Rockets squad because they've been so bad for so long. Like, would a Giannis or Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving want to come here? Probably not. But at the same time, $40 million on Fred VanVleet, no matter how you put that on paper, does not look good. And then you're going to have to look at Jalen Green. He's probably going to sign a Supermax extension, $25-30 million next season. So unless you figure out a way to trade away Fred VanVleet next season, clear off the cap for next year's free agency and bring in one of the big free agents that are available in 2024, this is basically the team that you're locked in with for the long-term future, because Dillon Brooks is going to get $20 million a year, no options until the 2026 season. Jalen Green's extension is going to come in the 2025 season. Then after that, it only gets more expensive. You got to pay Jabari Smith. You got to pay Alperen Şengün. You got to pay Cam Whitmore and Amen Thompson. So basically right now, this season and next season were when the Rockets could have made their splashes in free agency. And instead of going out and signing big 1-year prove-it deals, they signed a 2-year deal with a team option and a 4-year deal in Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet respectively, which to me does not reflect great salary cap management. So basically this team is the one that you're going to be going with moving forward. And I guess you're hoping that Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün take off and elevate their games to the next level. But the rest isn't too bad. You got Kevin Porter Jr. on a really steady $16 million a year deal. If he comes off the bench and plays his role, he will certainly outperform that contract. Jalen Green on his rookie deal. You got Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson on their rookie deals. Jeff Green is earning a little bit too much money for me at $9.6 million a year, but it is one of those mid-level exception team options next year that they'll probably decline because he is 36 years old, going to be 37. I don't know how much more winning basketball he has to offer to your team. Amen Thompson, rookie. And then Jock Landale, 4 years, $8 million a year, $32 million total. That's a bit too much to be a backup center, especially when you have a bona fide Alperen Şengün. And Jock Landale is 27 years old. I know he's been in the NBA for, I think, 2 seasons now. But this is it. This is as good as he's going to be, which is like 6-4 on 25% shooting from the 3-point line. Like, why would you spend more money than the Golden State Warriors spend on Kevon Looney? Why would you spend more money than like Bobby Portis is getting? I don't know why Jock Landale was the one they went all in on, because he is a good player. He's a positive backup center player, but $8 million a year could be put in a better spot. It feels like this Rocket squad did not allocate their money properly in a winning formula so that their team is going to win a championship 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. Jayshawn Tate, probably in the last year of his deal, $6.5 million, and then a team option next year. Alperen Şengün rookie deal, Tari Eason rookie deal, Cam Whitmore rookie deal, and then Aaron Holiday is the last guy who's earning guaranteed money. The rest are 2-way contracts and 10-day exhibition contracts, whatever. Not important, but I just don't love the way that the Rockets spent their salary cap this year, and I don't love what they've done moving forward. So really, you look at the season projection, it's not great, and you just hope that this team develops. Some of their stars break out, either Amen Thompson or Jalen Green, and you hope that the supporting cast is good enough around them that you didn't make a mistake going out and signing Fred VanVleet to $130 million and Dillon Brooks to like $100 million. As simple as that. 31.5 wins projected this season. Championship odds. This is the first team that isn't 50,000 to 1. They're 25,000 to 1 for whatever that's worth. But this is the team that's going to be coming in at 27th. It's not doom and gloom. It's not beautiful, perfect. Everything is going to be great. It's kind of in between with this Rocket squad, which is why it kind of took longer to go over this entire Houston Rocket squad. But that is going to do it for this deep dive episode. Let me know what your thoughts are, what you agree with, and what you disagree with. I'll catch you in the next one.